Hello friends. Before I start, make sure to subscribe to the channel, give this video a thumbs up, and leave a comment telling me where you're watching from, city and country. You won't want to miss what I'm about to share. My name is Robert Bob Carver, and I served as sheriff of Millbrook County, Nebraska for nearly 2 decades. I thought I'd seen every kind of small-town dispute imaginable, especially around Halloween, when teenagers get rowdy and folks call in every pumpkin theft like it's a felony. But what happened 5 years ago on Halloween night is something I still can't fully explain. It was October 31st, 2019. A Thursday, chilly, overcast, with just enough wind to make every half-dead cornstalk rattle like bones. Millbrook, population 3,800 or so, doesn't do much for Halloween beyond the usual trick-or-treating and the VFW's chili cook-off. That year, the high schoolers had planned a haunted hayride behind the football field, and the Methodist church hosted a pumpkin carving contest. Pretty standard stuff. I got to the station early, as usual. I remember the smell of Mabel's cinnamon coffee cake wafting through the open window. I had just finished going through weekend reports. 1 DUI, 2 noise complaints, and a loose horse on County Road 12. Nothing out of the ordinary. That's when the phone rang. Millbrook County Sheriff's Office, Carver speaking. A man's voice, trembling and broken, came through the line. "Sheriff, it's Bill Hartwell. I need help. I think I hurt Margaret. Real bad." Bill Hartwell, quiet man, veteran, ran a family farm about 12 miles west of town. I'd known him for years. His wife Margaret was the type of woman who made extra pies for the church bake sale and remembered every kid's birthday at Sunday school. Hearing the word hurt in relation to them froze my blood. "Bill, is Margaret conscious? Can she breathe?" A pause. "I don't know. She's on the kitchen floor. There's so much blood." I radioed Deputy Martinez, requested medical, and told them to stage at the end of the Hartwell driveway. Then I was out the door and into my Crown Vic, barreling down damp county roads, windshield wipers struggling against misty drizzle. The Hartwell place sits at the end of a gravel lane, surrounded by fields that were mostly harvested by then. I remember the driveway was lined with carved pumpkins, probably for trick-or-treaters who never came. Cornstalks were tied in bunches near the mailbox, the kind of festive touch Margaret always added. Bill was sitting on the porch steps, staring at his hands. His shirt was soaked in blood. He didn't look at me when I stepped out of the cruiser. "She's inside." I didn't move her. I approached carefully, one hand on my sidearm, just in case. Shock can do strange things to people. "Stay put, Bill. Keep your hands where I can see them." I entered through the screen door. The kitchen was a nightmare. Blood on the linoleum, splattered across the cabinets, soaked into a yellow dish towel on the floor. An iron skillet lay near the stove, dark stains along the edge. But there was no sign of Margaret. I cleared the rest of the house. No body, no movement. I called out her name. Nothing. Back on the porch, Bill was staring into the fields. "She was making breakfast," he said. Said something about selling part of the north field. I don't remember much after that. I just remember yelling. And then she was on the floor. Deputy Martinez arrived minutes later, and EMS pulled in behind her. We secured the scene. The blood was real, extensive, and there were clear signs of a struggle. But there was no Margaret Hartwell. Her purse was still on the kitchen counter. Her car was in the driveway. There were no drag marks, no footprints, no signs she left the house under her own power. "You're sure you didn't move her?" I asked Bill again. "Sheriff, I swear. I couldn't even look at her." We searched the property, top to bottom. Every outbuilding, every field, even drained the small pond. Nothing. Forensics confirmed the blood was Margaret's. But there was no body, no explanation. It became one of the strangest missing persons cases Millbrook had ever seen. Bill was eventually transferred to a state hospital in Lincoln, diagnosed with some form of dementia, possibly early onset. He never changed his story. Said he killed Margaret. Said he lost his temper. But here's where it gets strange. 2 weeks later, the young couple who bought the farmhouse from the Hartwell estate called me. "Sheriff," the husband said, "I don't want to sound crazy, but we've been hearing things in the kitchen at night. Footsteps, humming, the smell of bacon." They lasted 6 weeks before packing up and leaving. 3 more families tried living there over the next few years. None made it past Halloween. Each one reported the same thing. A woman's voice humming in the early morning hours. The aroma of bacon. Light footsteps crossing the floor. One woman swore she saw someone standing at the stove in a yellow dress, only to flick on the light and find the kitchen empty. The case of Margaret Hartwell is still officially open. Technically, she's a missing person. But if you ask around Millbrook, folks will tell you something else. They'll say Margaret comes home on Halloween. They say if you stand on the porch near midnight, you can hear her humming. And if you enter the kitchen on Halloween night, you might just smell breakfast cooking. Whatever happened in that house 5 years ago left a mark. One that doesn't wash away with bleach and elbow grease. The Hartwell place is empty again now. For sale. But no one's calling. And I don't blame them. If you ever find yourself west of town, 12 miles down a gravel lane lined with rotting pumpkins, do yourself a favor. Don't stop. And if you hear humming, keep driving. My name is James McCarthy. I was the sheriff of Riverside County, Montana for over 12 years. Quiet place. Not much in the way of crime. Some nights, it felt like the trees were the only things keeping watch besides me. But one Halloween night in 2020 changed the way I see land, law, and the strange ways people draw lines that maybe shouldn't be crossed. I remember that day well. October 31st fell on a Saturday. The sun went down early, and the temperature dropped fast. We don't get many trick-or-treaters this far out in the valley, just the occasional church group organizing a trunk-or-treat in town. That night, I was on my own. Deputy Collins was home with her kids, and I'd offered to take her shift. Around 5:30 p.m., just as the sky started to go violet and the wind picked up over the ridge, I got a call from Ted Morrison. Rancher, salt of the earth type. Had about 800 head of cattle and land that went back 3 generations. He lived out near Blackwood Road, just past the bend where the hills rise up and you lose cell service for a few miles. Sheriff, it's Ted. I need you to come out here. Kellerman moved the fence. Again. This time he's taken part of my fall pasture, and I'm not letting this one go. Frank Kellerman. New money, new boots, new ideas. Moved up from California about 5 years earlier. Built himself an eco-ranch with solar panels and pasture rotation programs, and had a habit of upsetting the locals with what he called progress. Ted continued, it happened last night. Or this morning. I didn't see it, but the fence is a good 30 yards west of where it was yesterday. Took a whole section of grazing land. All right, Ted. I'm on my way. Don't do anything stupid. No promises if that bastard comes down here. By the time I got there, the last bit of light was dying behind the mountains, and the Morrison place looked as still as the grave. Ted was out by the edge of his field, flashlight in one hand, shotgun cradled in the other. Put that thing away, I said, stepping out of the cruiser. I wasn't going to use it, he said, then added, not unless he showed up with a crew. We walked down to the fence line. Sure enough, there it was. Bright new posts, clean wire. It looked like someone had replaced the whole section during the night. But there were no tire tracks, no disturbed earth, no signs of a crew or machinery. That alone struck me as odd. This is good grazing land, Ted muttered. He picks now, Halloween night, to pull this? I asked if he had any proof Kellerman did it. It wasn't like this yesterday, he said. I walk this fence every evening. Let's go talk to Frank. Kellerman's place was half a mile north, lit up like a city block with solar-powered yard lights. He came to the door in a fleece vest and slippers, holding a glass of wine like he was expecting a trick-or-treater. Sheriff, Ted, what brings you out this spooky night? You moved the fence, Frank? He blinked. No, I haven't touched it. Why would I? Ted started yelling. I stepped between them. Cool it. Frank, we need to walk that line. Now. To his credit, he didn't argue. We walked the fence under flashlights. Frank looked more confused than angry. Sheriff, I swear this fence has always been right here. My deed says so. And mine says different, Ted snapped. I try to keep the peace. We'll bring out Mike Patterson tomorrow. Let the surveyor figure it out. But that night didn't end there. As I turned to head back to the cruiser, something caught my eye. One of the posts, it moved. Not much, maybe an inch or two. But it swayed, like it had been pushed from underground. The soil around it cracked slightly. I stopped. Either of you see that? They both shook their heads. I need to document this, I said, kneeling to take a photo. Then another post shuddered. And another. It was like the ground was adjusting itself. The whole fence line shifted westward, foot by foot, until it reclaimed the stolen land. We stood in silence, flashlights trembling in our hands. "What the hell is this?" Frank whispered. Ted turned to me. "You seeing this too, Sheriff?" I nodded. "Yeah, I'm seeing it." We stood there for 20 minutes, watching the fence move like something alive, like the land itself was redrawing its own borders. When it finally stopped, the fence was exactly where Ted said it had been the day before. Frank turned pale. You think someone did this with underground equipment? In this soil? Overnight? With no sound?" I said, "Not likely." We walked back in silence. Neither man said much after that. The next morning, I brought Mike Patterson out to check the markers. Sure enough, the original survey stakes were untouched. The fence had been moved. Twice. Once east, once back west. But there were no tool marks, no signs of machinery, nothing to suggest human intervention. Mike just scratched his head. "I've been surveying this land for 25 years. I've never seen anything like this." Ted sold his ranch the next year. Said he couldn't sleep anymore. Said he heard the fence moving at night. Heard the posts creaking like they were alive. Frank stayed, but he doesn't go near the fence line anymore. He put up a second boundary 50 yards in, just to be safe. As for me, I check that stretch every Halloween. And every time I do, I see something different. A new post, a shifted wire, a corner leaning west that wasn't leaning the day before. I've stopped trying to explain it. Some things you don't solve. Some land doesn't want to be divided. So if you're ever out on Blackwood Road on Halloween night and you hear metal creaking in the dark, keep driving. Whatever moves those fence posts isn't interested in boundaries, and it doesn't need your permission. My name is Patricia Williams. I've been the sheriff of Clearwater County, Idaho, for close to 10 years. If you've never heard of us, I don't blame you. We're tucked into the northern panhandle, surrounded by deep woods and rivers so clear they look like mirrors. It's the kind of place where people come to disappear, and most of the time, that's not a problem. But on Halloween night in 2021, I got a call that still haunts me. It was around 5 p.m., just as the sun started sinking behind the ridges. The wind picked up, and the aspens were glowing gold, their leaves scraping against each other like whispers. The roads were quiet, and I was at my desk at the county building in Orofino, finishing paperwork and sipping lukewarm coffee. That's when Deputy Rob Miller came in with a furrowed brow and a clipboard. "Sheriff, we got a missing person. Michael Davidson. His daughter Susan just drove up from Seattle. Says she hasn't heard from him in over a week. Where's he live? Cabin up on Dwarack Creek. About 15 miles from town." I remembered the name. Davidson had lived out there for years. Kept to himself, came into town once a week for supplies. Always paid cash. Never caused any trouble. "All right," I said. "Let's go." The road to Davidson's cabin was narrow, winding, and full of blind curves. By the time we got there, the sky was almost dark. A few Halloween decorations were still fluttering on fence posts. Paper ghosts, a sagging scarecrow. Susan met us on the porch. Mid-40s. Looked tired. "He always calls every Sunday," she said. "When he missed our call last week, I thought maybe he was out fishing. But when he didn't call this week either." I drove out. "What did you find?" "Nothing. His truck's in the shed. House looks like he just stepped out. Dinner on the table. Coffee cup in the sink." We walked inside. The cabin was small, warm, clean. Smelled like pine and old paper. There were dishes on the table, a book left open by the fireplace, and a flannel jacket hung on the back of a chair. "Any medical issues?" "Just blood pressure. But he's always been healthy." Miller and I searched the area, using flashlights as the last bit of daylight disappeared. The woods were quiet. Not silent, just still. We found nothing. Back at the station, I started making calls. Checked the grocery store, the post office, the diner. A few people remembered seeing Michael the week before. No one had seen him since. Then things got weird. The next morning, Janet at Clearwater Market called me. "Sheriff, I know this sounds strange, but I saw Michael Davidson yesterday. In the canned goods aisle." "Are you sure?" "Pretty sure. He was wearing that green jacket of his. Looked younger though. Healthier." I was going to say hi, but when I turned the corner, he was gone. That afternoon, Tom from the hardware store called. Same story. Davidson had come in, bought some nails and a can of stain. Paid cash. Didn't say much. Over the next 3 days, we got 6 more calls like that. "Sheriff, I just saw Michael in line at the gas station. He was at the post office this morning. He looked like he did 10 years ago. Each report was short, inconsistent, and unreliable. But they all agreed on one thing. Michael Davidson wasn't acting like a man who'd gone missing. He looked healthy, calm, normal. By Halloween night, I'd had enough. I drove back to the cabin with Miller just after sunset. The forest was deep in shadow. Leaves skittered across the gravel like dry whispers. Susan was still there. "He's back," she said. Her voice was flat. "What?" "He's inside, drinking coffee. Says he's been here the whole time." We stepped onto the porch and looked through the window. Sure enough, there was Michael Davidson, sitting in his favorite chair, a steaming mug in his hand. I knocked. He looked up, smiled, and opened the door. "Evening, Sheriff." "Susan, everything all right?" "We got reports you were missing." "Missing? I've been right here. Must be a mix-up." "You haven't been into town?" "Not since last week." He looked the same, sounded the same, but something was off. He looked younger, smoother. His eyes were too clear. "Mr. Davidson, mind if we look around?" "Not at all." We walked the cabin again. Everything looked lived in. Dishes washed, books shifted, fridge stocked. Susan stood near the fireplace. "He doesn't remember anything," she whispered. "Doesn't even remember missing our call. Could be a memory issue. Maybe a mild stroke." She shook her head. He didn't recognize a photo I showed him. Of Mom. Said he never met her. I stepped back outside and radioed for a wellness team to check on him the next morning. As I waited for Miller, I looked into the dark woods and felt that heavy stillness again. Not just quiet. Not just Halloween still. Something else. That night, I couldn't sleep. Around 1 a.m., I drove back to the cabin alone. Parked a half-mile down and walked up with my flashlight off. I stopped just before the tree line. The cabin was dark. No lights. Then, just past the window, a figure moved. It was Michael, or something that looked like him. Then another version stepped into view. Older, then younger again. Same man, different bodies. They passed by the window, one after the other. 10, maybe 15 versions. Different clothes, different gaits, but all him. At exactly midnight, they vanished. The cabin lights blinked out. I waited another hour. Nothing. The next morning, the cabin was empty. No sign of Michael. No dishes. No coffee. Just dust. Susan called me from Seattle 2 days later. She'd driven back to find the place abandoned. She asked me if we were sure her father had even been alive this whole time. I didn't know what to say. We filed the case as unresolved. People still report seeing Michael Davidson around town. At the store. Near the river. Walking trails alone. He's always wearing that green jacket. Always looks a little different. Sometimes younger. Sometimes old. So if you're ever hiking near Dwarack Creek on Halloween night and you see a man walking alone, do yourself a favor. Don't follow him. Because I think Michael Davidson never really came back. I think he's still trying to figure out which version of himself he is. And some nights, on Halloween, I wonder if he's still walking between them. My name is David Michael Thompson, and I was sheriff of Millfield County, West Virginia, for 14 years. We're talking coal country, deep hollers, ridges that block the sun half the year, and roads that look like they were carved by hand. Most people around here keep to themselves. And on Halloween, things get even quieter. But back in 2019, on Halloween night, I got a call I'll never forget. It came in at 11:47 p.m. Most folks were in bed by then. The trick-or-treaters had long gone home, and the only lights left on were porch bulbs and the occasional jack-o'-lantern still burning. The rain had just started, a steady, cold drizzle that made everything slick. Millfield County Sheriff's Office. Thompson speaking. "Sheriff, this is Barbara Hensley. I need you to come up to Crow Mountain. There's noise coming from the old Pierce place. It sounds like a whole family's moved in next door." Barbara Hensley, widow, 74, lived alone. I knew her. She'd never once called to complain in all my years. What kind of noise? Voices, kids, footsteps, doors slamming. I swear I heard a baby crying. "Sheriff, that place has been empty for 20 years. The Pierce house. Everyone in the county knew about it. Walter and Ruth and Pierce built it in the 50s. Raised 5 kids there. But after their youngest died in the late 80s, things went downhill. Ruth then started hearing things. Setting places at the table for her dead son. Neighbors said she was never quite the same. She died in '99. Walter followed a couple years later. The house had sat empty ever since. I grabbed my coat and drove up through the mountain fog. The road twisted like a snake and narrowed to barely one lane. Trees loomed in every direction, and the mist clung to the branches like old webs. Barbara met me on the porch, wrapped in a shawl. It stopped when you pulled up, but I heard it. Laughter, arguing, dishes clinking. You tell me what kind of abandoned house makes those sounds on Halloween night. I looked across the clearing. The Pierce house stood hunched and rotting, 2 stories tall with a sagging porch. One window still had a plastic pumpkin taped to it from God knows how long ago. I walked over slowly, hand resting on my sidearm. Sheriff Thompson, if anyone's in there, I need you to come out now. Nothing. The screen door creaked open. I stepped inside. The smell hit me first. Not must or mold. No, it smelled like stew. Like someone had been cooking. And smoke. Cigarettes. Baby powder. I walked through the living room. Furniture still covered in old sheets. Dust ankle-thick on the floor. But the kitchen table? Clean. Set for dinner. 6 plates. 1 child-sized. I radioed Miller to get a deputy up here to secure the perimeter. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Upstairs. Light. Quick. Like a kid running. I followed, careful on the sagging steps. At the top, I heard voices. A man and a woman arguing, muffled behind one of the bedroom doors. Then a slam. Then silence. I opened the door. Empty room. Just a broken dresser and peeling wallpaper. Then I heard humming. Downstairs. I made my way back. The front door was closed now. Locked. Sheriff. Barbara's voice, shouting from her house next door. I ran to the window. She was pointing toward the Pierce house. There's someone on the porch. I turned back. The porch was empty. I unlocked the front door and stepped out. Rain pattered on the leaves. Barbara was shaking her head. I saw her, Sheriff. Ruth Ann. Standing right where you are. Wearing that yellow apron she used to garden in. I swear to you. We stood in the dark for a long time. Over the next few days, the calls kept coming. From Barbara. From hikers. From hunters. Voices in the house. Singing. Smell of food. Each time we checked, it was empty. On November 3rd, I went back alone. Halloween was over, but something felt unfinished. The house was quiet, but in the kitchen, the table was still set. I heard the faintest whisper of conversation in the air. Then a chair moved. Just a few inches. I backed out. A week later, Barbara called again. This time, she didn't sound scared. She sounded calm. Sheriff, I think they're just living. Over there. In their time. Not ours. I heard Ruth and humming again last night. It wasn't spooky. It was nice. She never called again. She passed away the following spring. Heart attack in her garden. When I visited her property afterward, I walked up the hill one last time. The Pierce house stood quiet. But as I turned to leave, I heard it. 3 voices. A woman, a man, and an older woman I swear sounded just like Barbara. Laughing. They sounded happy. We boarded up the Pierce house after that. Put up no trespassing signs. It still stands. But every Halloween, someone calls in a report. Voices. A baby crying. The smell of stew. I just tell them, let them be. They're home. If you ever find yourself up on Crow Mountain on Halloween night, roll your windows up. Don't stop. Don't listen. Because sometimes the past doesn't want to be disturbed. And sometimes, it just wants to be remembered. My name is Michael Robert Davis, and I served as sheriff of Crawford County, Kansas for over a decade. We cover nearly 600 square miles of farmland, back roads, and empty stretches of prairie where wind and sky go on forever. It's the kind of place where people value privacy, especially folks out on the old properties that sit miles from the nearest neighbor. Halloween isn't a big deal out here. You get a few kids in town dressed like cowboys and superheroes, but most of the county just turns off the porch light and calls it a night. But on October 31st, 2020, I got a call that shook me. It came in mid-afternoon, a cold, gray Halloween with low clouds and a wind that carried the smell of dry leaves and distant wood smoke. I was reviewing equipment budgets when the phone rang. Crawford County Sheriff's Office. This is Davis. Sheriff, this is Dr. Sullivan at Pittsburgh Community Hospital. I'm calling about a patient, Dorothy Kellerman. She missed a follow-up appointment today and isn't answering her phone. She's 76, lives alone out on County Road 225. I knew the name. Dorothy Kellerman. Widow. lived on a 40-acre plot northeast of town. Her husband had passed years ago. She was quiet, but known for keeping her place immaculate. She have family? None listed. No kids, no next of kin. I decided to drive out there myself. The road to her property cuts through old farmland, past rusted mailboxes and fields turned brown for winter. I remember passing 2 houses with pumpkins still out, the wind knocking them gently against porch rails. The Kellerman place sat at the end of a gravel drive, neat as always. House freshly painted, yard trimmed, curtains drawn. Her car was in the driveway. I knocked. No answer. Mrs. Kellerman? It's Sheriff Davis. The porch light flicked on. Then the door opened. A woman stood there. Mid-60s, maybe. Gray hair in a bun. Sweater. Calm eyes. Good afternoon, Sheriff. Can I help you? I'm looking for Dorothy Kellerman. That's me. I blinked. You missed a doctor's appointment this morning. They were concerned. She smiled faintly. I think they must be mistaken. I haven't seen a doctor in months. Do you mind if I come in? She stepped aside. Inside, the house looked normal. A kettle on the stove. Knitting on the arm of the couch. It smelled like cinnamon and coffee. How old are you, ma'am? 76. She didn't look it. I left shortly after and called the hospital. That's impossible, Dr. Sullivan said. Dorothy Kellerman passed away 3 weeks ago. October 12th, heart failure. I double-checked the file. Same name, same address. You're telling me the woman I spoke to is dead? According to our records, yes. I drove back to the house just before dark. The porch light was off. I knocked again. No answer, but I heard footsteps inside. Then a light turned on in the kitchen. Through the window, I saw her again. This time older. Slower. She moved like someone in their 80s. Same face, but aged. She stirred something on the stove, humming softly. I called out. She turned, looked through the window. Then the light clicked off. Over the following days, I checked on her again and again. Each time, a different version answered the door. Sometimes she looked 40, sometimes 70. Once, she was so young I thought I had the wrong house. But she always said her name was Dorothy Kellerman. I started digging. Death certificate confirmed. Buried in Elmwood Cemetery. Plot C, 247. I called the cemetery. Sheriff, there's a problem. That grave's empty. The soil's been disturbed from the inside. Looks like someone clawed their way out. I didn't respond. That Halloween night, I returned one last time. Just before midnight. The house was glowing. Every window lit. I walked to the porch and knocked. No answer. But through the front window, I saw something I still can't explain. Dorothy. Multiple versions of her. Young. Middle-aged. Elderly. All of them inside. Moving through the house like shadows in a slideshow. Then, in the mirror behind the couch, I saw them all at once. Reflected in a dozen timelines. And in that reflection, one version looked right at me. Sheriff, she said, I think I left something undone. Then she faded. The lights went dark. The house sat empty. I never saw her again. The county took the land and turned it into a nature preserve, as per a letter found on the kitchen table months later, signed by Dorothy. It simply read, "This land deserves to outlast me. Thank you." People still report seeing her. In the windows. On the porch. Always wearing the same sweater. Sometimes she's 30. Sometimes she's old. So if you're ever near County Road 225 on Halloween night, and you see a porch light flicker on where no one lives anymore, don't knock. Because I think Dorothy Kellerman never really left. And she may not be alone.